So, Preston, I mean, I think as we think back to the 2022 season, we remember the playoff run and all that, but it's easy to forget that that team does not make the playoffs without the contributions of some of the young guys that came up last year. I mean, Derek Hall, Bailey Falter, I've kind of called them the unsung heroes of the season because when we had the injuries on the big league level last year, you needed those contributions from those young players. And we know Matt Vierling played really well. He wasn't in the minors for much of last year at all, but came up and played really well once the season started. And so it's important what the young guys are doing down on the farm. It's important for the chances of the 2023 Phillies to get back to the World Series. So just as we get started here with the 23 season, it's prospect ranking time. A lot of 100 prospects out, top 10 prospect rankings are out and all that. How many prospects do you think you would consider among the top 100 or 110 in the sport?
Yeah, just number one, great to be on. I think it just depends how you look at it. I think it's tough, right? I think you see a lot of these rankings, top 100s, top 10s. So let's just stick with top 100s right now. And I love talking prospects.
Mm-hmm.
You see top 100s, and one of the things that really bothers me is you see players that have come straight out of the draft who have, they're great talents, but they've done nothing so far in Pro Bowl, and they go straight on the top 100 list.
Yeah.
And I think there's special exceptions for that. But I think, the majority of the players should not start on those lists. And I think, just referring to our players, I think we should have at least at the main three would be Andy Painter, Mick Abel, and Griff McGary. To me, should be on any top 100 list. If they're not, it's hard for me to take the list seriously, honestly. And then, I think Hal Lee is another guy that should be squarely in that mix with Justin Crawford as well. So those five. And with Justin, another guy, like I said, just mentioning guy out of the draft, like, he needs to go out and prove it, right?
Yeah.
And prove that he's a superstar talent. And when he does that, then he'll show up on those lists.
Well, you mentioned Andrew Painter right at the top there. I know there are some lists that consider him the best pitching prospect in baseball. He's certainly among the upper echelon, a top 10 prospect in all of baseball, regardless. And there's a lot of excitement around him. I know Dave Dombrowski has mentioned on occasion the possibility of him starting the season with the big league club, which would be almost unprecedented in Phillies history. It just hasn't happened that a kid as young as him would start the season in the big leagues. What kind of workload do you anticipate him getting here in 2023, considering he hasn't really ever pitched more than 100 innings in professional baseball? And if this team makes a playoff run and they want to have him available for later in the season, it's going to be tricky to have him start the season and finish the season with the Phils.
Yeah, in terms of like specific innings, I'll probably stay away from that. Yeah. I think, we have so much more in today's game with metrics and data that we can track and see how his body's trending, whether it's release height, spins, extension, everything that goes along with it. So, but I think one thing I'll say about Andy is it's a very mature kid mentally and physically. I think for his body, even though he's only 19 years old, he spent the whole offseason at Cressy training where he spent, the bulk of his high school career too. So we think he's going to be in a really good spot. And I think he'll tell us how far he can get, right? I think you see other organizations have done that with some of their young prospects. Like, let's not set a cap on guys. Let's trust what we're seeing in the data perspective and kind of take it as far as he can go.
You mentioned Cressy just a second ago. Alex Coffey of the Inquirer had a story out about that today and the work that he's been doing this offseason, already up to 95 miles an hour in his offseason throwing, which is great. How closely do you guys work with organizations, with companies like Cressy to shepherd prospects through the offseason to get them where they need to be by the time Clearwater rolls around?
Yeah, I think it's case by case. We obviously have a complex down here in Florida that we're open essentially year round. We have 50 players training right now. We want to be the hub for all of our players, but we also know that's not realistic for everyone, and we're going to work with everybody. So, Cressy being one of the facilities that, actually a handful of our guys train at. So it's a short drive over for me here from Tampa. And I think it's a part of these guys are going to go to these places. So we're going to partner with them to make sure they're getting the care and the training that they need.
You mentioned Andrew Painter, Mick Abel, and Griff McGary, the three big pitching prospects that the Phillies have right now. Let's talk about Mick Abel here for just a second, because at the start of last year, I think most rankings had Abel ahead of Painter. Painter seemed to pass him during the course of this last offseason, but understanding that or this past season, understanding that development is not necessarily linear, that not everybody progresses at the same level. Where is Mick Abel right now in terms of reaching his ceiling, and what do you think that ceiling is for him?
Yeah, I think Mick's just scratching the surface. And if you would have told me at the end of the year, like just watching all of our guys, Mick was probably the guy I was most proud of last year. He's a guy that didn't pitch a lot in high school because of COVID. Got to pro ball, had a little bit of mechanical things he was working through with still COVID going on through 40 innings. And then I think just getting him out of like kind of his training environment and getting him into more pitching and learning to go deeper into games. And he did that last year. And I was really proud of where he got to. I think, Mick is a special talent in the sense that he can do a lot of things with the baseball, with the fastball, the slider, curveball, changeup. He's got like the weapons you would ask for. So, yeah, I think he's just scratching where he's going to be. When we look up 5-10 years from now, I think he'll be in a rotation, hopefully in the Phillies.
And I know with Griff McGary, they're still grooming him as a starting pitcher here. Control command has been an issue for him throughout his brief professional career so far, but it looks as though he made some strides last year in that area. Is the plan still to pursue him as a starting pitcher this year? And do you think he could eventually get called up in 2023 and have more of a future for this season immediately as a bullpen guy?
Yeah, I think we view Griff McGary as a pure starting pitcher, and just pure stuff. It's as good a stuff as anybody I've seen at the minor league level. I mean, just like, and when you kind of wrap everything together with the release height, the vertical approach angle on all of his mix, the fastball is electric, and honestly, anything he's really throws up there just grades out as elite. And like you said, you mentioned some of the command stuff. It's got to still tighten up. We saw some strides last year at times. I think you take out a handful of starts or outings, and it was a lot better than even the numbers show. We think there's still a path to better command. So, and with the true weapons that he has, we're going to give him every chance to start. And in regards to the second part of your question about pitching out of the bullpen, I think you see teams get creative all across baseball, and I think we'll do the same, right? If a need arises and we need a bullpen arm, and Griff's in that mix, then we'll view him as a reliever maybe. But going in to start, it'll be a true starting pitcher.
Would you do that with Mick as well? Potentially think of him in a bullpen spot as well?
I think there are different stages in their development. I think at this point, Mick's just a true starting pitcher.
Okay. So you've been here for what, a couple of years now, right? You joined. When did you come to the organization? Just before last year, correct?
Starting my second year now.
Okay, right. So as you've been here now and gotten acclimated, how has, in your mind, the talent level changed in the last couple of years from what was in the pipeline to what you guys have now?
Yeah, so I came in last year at Instruction League. So all I really know is last year's draft and then the year prior. Mm-hmm. I think it's just different philosophies. When you look at Brian Barber, what him and his team are doing, it's no secret what we're looking for. I mean, it's big physical bodies with tools, projection, and you see it with and just in Brian's short time here. I mean, Andy Painter, Mick Abel, Griff McGary, Justin Crawford. I mean, it kind of goes down the whole list of guys. Alex McFarland, Gabriel Rincones, Amarion Boyd. I can name it's very good bodies, projection with tools. And I think then handing that over to our player development system, that's what I want, right? And we want guys to work with and kids that are like hungry and willing to learn and work. And I think we can get the best out of those guys. So yeah, I honestly a little bit forgot your question, but
you got it. You got it.
Yeah,
I mean, how would you say, too, I know one of the criticisms of the farm system and player development in the past before you arrived here, and this has been documented with a number of stories that the beat writers have written over the last year or so, was that there didn't seem to be a synergy between maybe what the scouting department was doing and what the player development department was doing, and then what players are being told to do at the big league level. How has that changed in the last year?
Yeah, I think true organizational alignment is very hard to find, and it's very hard to accomplish. I think one thing we've done, Brian and I are very close. We're together. I'm in the draft room. I get to talk with him, on a daily basis. I probably call him, bug him too much. And then just how we restructured our hitting department, we really tried to tie that in together. We brought in Luke Merton, who's going to do a little bit of a dual role as our director of hitting. So Luke's going to do a lot of scouting on the amateur side, and then also come and work with those players on the PD side. So it kind of ties the two together of what we're looking for and then what we can work with. And I think on the pitching side, we've already kind of done that with Brian Kaplan coming aboard, Travis Hergert stayed. He was already here prior to me, but we're trying to align ourselves completely to where when we draft a player or acquire a player, we know exactly what the steps are, 1, 2, and 3, to get them where they need to be.
And do you see the same thing as the synergy between the coaching that the players are getting at the minor league level and it being consistent with what they get at the big league level as well?
Yeah, I know like one thing, like the lockout was really tough last year. I think the one really good positive that came out of it for just the Phillies, and just speaking on the Phillies, but is our whole major league staff was down here, so they got to spend time with our PD staff and our front office and see and honestly work with our minor league players a little bit behind the scenes. And so it was great to get aligned there. Adam Everett, our infield coordinator, is talking with Bobby Dickerson, and then so on and so forth. So I think it really helped align the group together.
Obviously, this pitching, the pitching in the minors seems to be the strength with Painter and Abel, McGary, the top three prospects. And this team, throughout its history, has had a hard time developing outfielders into really productive major league players. There's been a couple here and there, but not many that have actually been drafted, developed, and then stayed with the Phillies for a length of time. Pat Burrell might be the last example of that. So what are you all doing in terms of trying to develop position players? Bryson Stott, I think we're expecting bigger things from him this year, and he really came up last year and had a very good rookie season. You have Alec Boehm, who seemed to improve last year. Two young guys I think you can start to see maybe are developing into really good major league players. But in terms of developing that next homegrown star position player, what is the organization doing to give themselves some prospects that you would start to see move up into that top 100, into that level of excitement that you're feeling with a Painter and Abel and a McGary?
Yeah, I think just pitching, I think so. I don't want to say this, but it's a little bit easier, honestly, because the pitching is so good in the major leagues, and like the adjustment these guys have to make, it's tough. I think so. Understanding from a player development standpoint that sometimes a guy's performing in the minor leagues doesn't mean he's going to perform in the major leagues, because there's a lot of underlying stuff that goes into it. So I think as a player development department, we're going to attack those things in the sense that we're developing major league players. We're not developing players to perform in the minor leagues. I think that can get lost a little bit at times. So I think we're trying to really individualize our training plans and individualize everything from a swing perspective, from a training environment, to allow those players to succeed in their environment, which will ultimately be the major league environment in the end.
Can you give me a prospect or two the organization is really high on right now that maybe the casual Phillies fan doesn't know about?
Okay, I'm going to take Painter, Abel, McGary, How Lee, and Crawford kind of off the table.
Yeah.
I would say a couple guys that were drafted last year. I'll give you Gabriel Rincones Jr. He had a little bit of a shoulder injury, was nicked up, an outfielder at FAU. Big physical kid. I think there's a good hit power combo in there. I think the defense has still got a little bit of ways to go, but I think he's a worker. He gets after in the gym, so I think we can really attack that. But I think he's a name to watch this year. Another outfielder out of the draft, Amarion Boyd, high school kid out of Batesville, Mississippi. Elite athlete, elite runner. It's a center field profile, makes a ton of contact, and I think we got him at 155 pounds, and he's already 175 right now. And I think he's a kid that is going to be an electric gap to gap type explosive type player. And if you want to go to the pitching side, I'll give you a couple pitching names. Alex McFarland, last year a right-handed pitcher out of Miami, great body, electric stuff. It's very similar to Griff McGary, honestly, and it's he's a guy I think that a Phillies fan should know about.
And I guess maybe this is a slightly different question because the guys you're talking about, I think, are lower in the minors. They're not exactly candidates to join the 2023 Phils. But who do you think could make an impact in the majors this year in somewhat similar of a way that we saw Derek Hall and Bailey Falter make? Players that could be called up that could actually contribute to this team going on a playoff run.
I'm going to give you a couple prospect names that are like kind of on the verge of that. I think the first one will be a right-handed pitcher, Andrew Baker. We saw him really improve last year. Honestly, if you would have saw him in April and then saw him in September, it was two different guys. He was the guy that really struggled with command, and the command just continued to tick up, month after month. The stuff is electric. It's 98 to 102 with an absolute wipeout slider. It's that 88-91 world. He's working on a cutter now. I think he's a guy, if the strikes continue to improve, that could be up to impact the big league team sooner rather than later. And the offensive side, I'll give you another name. I don't know if it's necessarily this year he impacts them, but I think he's a guy that's in that upper levels that could come up in some fashion. Carlos De La Cruz, guy that played all three outfields last year, kind of came into his own. 6'8". Honestly, looks like he's more of a power forward than a center fielder, but it's the sprint speeds are very good. He runs better than you think. The routes are better than you think. He can play some first base as well, and I think he has a really tight swing, and the power is developing. And those two I'd probably highlight from a prospect perspective. Let me think like more from a depth perspective. Kind of caught me off guard there on that. I'd probably
Sorry.
no, you're good.
Well, let me ask you. Let me throw one and last thing. Let me throw one more name at you. And Rob Thompson mentioned him. He's not a young guy. He was a top prospect in the organization, but a guy who I wrote about this last week because Rob Thompson mentioned him is Scott Kingery. With Vierling and Nick Maton moving on to the Tigers, there might be an opening for a guy who can play all kinds of different positions. Where is Scott Kingery right now? It's been a long time since he has been a factor at the big league level and in the mix for a potential big league job.
Yeah, I kind of was thinking more in the prospect area.
Yeah,
Scotty's a guy to me that, definitely the organization hasn't given up on. He's out in Arizona right now. He's been hitting with Kevin Long all off season. So I think we're pretty confident he can impact the big league club in some way. When he's obviously a very versatile player, can play second base, shortstop, some outfield as well. And I think obviously Philly fans have seen the player he can be, and I think we just got to get him back where he was. And another guy we mentioned too that we saw a little bit at the end of last year on the roster, but would be Dalton Guthrie. Puts together a really quality at bat, very versatile too, can play all three outfield spots as well as some infield. Mm-hmm. And he's another guy, just a gamer, kind of baseball rat type.
Yeah, I was really impressed with Guthrie last year. I thought he looked really good in the limited time, and I feel like he played so well that it maybe allowed Dave Dombrowski to feel like he could move Vierling to Detroit in that deal because it sure seemed like he knew how to have a professional at bat from the moment he came up last year. So it's really great to see, and it had been a long time since we had seen young players developed by the Phillies come up and actually make a positive impact at the big league level, and we saw how important it was last year for them to do that. So we're looking forward to seeing more of these young guys and seeing what you all can do with them during the course of this next offseason. Preston, thank you so much for coming on Hitting Season today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.